Hello and welcome back to Bookish. Today I want to do another video in my series of where not to start with certain authors, and today's author is P.D. James. So this is where not to start with the works of P.D. James. P.D. James was an English mystery writer, really prolific and creative. What I think is one of the great detectives in literary history. His name was Adam Dalgliesh, and I'll talk more about him in just a little bit. But in addition to that, she wrote a science fiction book. She wrote books that were not necessarily detective stories. She started another series of detective stories, or wrote a couple of books in another series of detective stories. And so I wanted to talk about, where not to start. Now, by me saying where not to start with these books, it doesn't necessarily mean that I think these are bad books, even though sometimes that's true. It can just mean that I don't think this is the best place to start to get an appreciation with this author's work. And with P.D. James, I really think there are some definite places where if you started reading P.D. James with these titles, you might think, well, P.D. James is not a good novelist, not a good writer. This book is definitely not for me. So to start off, the first book, which I would tell you where not to start with P.D. James, is actually a book that I think is a bad book, and that is Death Comes to Pemberley. P.D. James wrote this mystery centering around Pemberley, the home of Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy, after they're married, and there is kind of a murder mystery taking place going on, and really the novel is just, I think, a mess. As far as a mystery, it's one of those mysteries which you are not given the information you need to solve, in terms of, a novel which is supposed to be kind of, I guess, almost like fan fiction for Jane Austen, and for Pride and Prejudice, you get very little of Elizabeth Bennet, and this, I think, is my largest problem with it. Elizabeth Bennet is one of the great characters, I think, in all of English literature, and you would think if you were writing a piece of kind of fan fiction or homage fiction, centered around Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy, that Elizabeth Bennet would play a large role in solving the mystery. She plays almost no role, not only in solving the mystery, but almost no role in the book at all. She is largely absent, and that, to me, is just a colossal mistake. And I don't think Death Comes to Pemberley is a very good book. And lots of people pick it up during Jane Austen July as a book, that's kind of set in Jane Austen's world or uses her characters, but isn't by Jane Austen, and I really think it is not a good book. The second book I would warn you away from is a book called Innocent Blood. This book is odd. It has interesting characters, and it kind of has an interesting premise, but it also feels like P.D. James, who is quite conservative, making kind of a political statement about adoption. The story involves a young woman who essentially learns she's adopted, and over the course of learning about her birth parents, she learns some really disturbing things about them, and then things take place after that, and those would all be spoilers, which makes it sound like more of a mystery than it is. But it's long. For what it's trying to do, it's long, and it's overly detailed, and it gives us too much insight into her opinions about the way adoption laws work, or the way the foster care system works in England. I don't think it quite works as a novel. I think if you read it, you would not necessarily think of P.D. James as being the kind of really efficient, good writer that she was. So the third book I want to mention as of where not to start with P.D. James is An Unsuitable Job for a Woman, which introduces a new kind of detective character, this time a private detective, not actually somebody working for the police force, and her name is Cordelia Gray. And I really liked the book, An Unsuitable Job for a Woman, and I think Cordelia Gray is a really interesting character, and the only reason I put this book on the list of where not to start is there are only two of them. There's only this book and then a second book, and I can't remember what the title of that second book is, that involved Cordelia Gray, and then she just stopped writing books about that character, and I really think that's a shame. So me warning you off of that book as a place to start is I don't want you to start there and kind of think, wow, this is great, I want to read more of these books, and only find out, hey, there are only two. I think these are excellent books, or I think An Unsuitable Job for a Woman is an excellent book to read after you've kind of begun reading P.D. James' other works. So as I oftentimes, or as I always do in these videos, in addition to telling you places where, maybe don't start with P.D. James, I also want to give you an idea of places to start. And the simple answer for where to start with P.D. James and her work is to start with the Adam Dalgliesh mysteries. Adam Dalgliesh is an incredibly memorable character. He is a police detective, a detective chief inspector eventually. He is a large physical man, and at the same time he writes poetry and is a published poet, and enjoys music and good wine and literature, and he's a fairly reserved character. He doesn't put a lot of ideas out there about what might have happened before he has all the clues. He's a good manager of the detective team, which eventually he leads, and he's just a really great detective character. One of my absolute favorites, to be honest with you. So what I would tell you is to start with Adam Dalgliesh Mysteries, and there are 3 that I think are a good place to start. Now, you need to know that Adam Dalgliesh appears in P.D. James Mysteries beginning with the books in the 60s, which I believe the first book was Cover Her Face or Uncover Her Face, which was written in the 1960s. And Adam Dalgliesh is still appearing in P.D. James novels into the 2000s. So over the course of that, lots of things happen in the world, which sometimes are and are not reflected in the books. And because they're written over such a large period of time, what I would say is that I don't necessarily think you have to read them in order. As a matter of fact, I think if you kind of started maybe in the mid-80s and then read to the end, that would be fine. But I'm just going to mention 3 of the best mysteries, I think, that P.D. James wrote. And these are not in order chronologically or any other way. So the first one is The Murder Room. The Murder Room is set at kind of a private museum inside the city of London. It is a great example of P.D. James writing, kind of a locked door mystery. How did somebody get in? Who could have done this? And it's just really brilliantly plotted and paced, and it's just a great mystery. And so I would definitely recommend The Murder Room. Devices and Desires is the second one of the Adam Dalgliesh mysteries I would mention. In this we find Adam Dalgliesh trying to take a vacation. He's inherited a piece of property from his aunt that's out on some kind of deserted headland in, I believe, southern England. Maybe it's northern England. I can't remember which. And he's really just out there to kind of write and get away from everything and everyone. And, mystery and murder kind of finds him, and he finds himself in a position where he ends up solving this crime. I like this one in particular because we see Adam Dalgliesh being physical in this one, in a sense that he has to do kind of physically heroic or difficult things, which is not always true in an Adam Dalgliesh mystery. And then I think my favorite is Original Sin. Original Sin is set in a publishing house that's owned by a family, and it's really kind of literary and about books and publishing and then murder. And we see Dalgliesh having published, I think, his second volume of poetry, become involved in this mystery which takes place at this publishing house, which is in some kind of like an old manor house or old, anyway, it's really atmospheric, it's really well done, it's a really great mystery. So I would definitely recommend starting there. But if you're not a mystery fan, P.D. James did write one science fiction dystopian novel, and that is The Children of Men, which was made into a movie, which I haven't seen, but I understand is a good deal different from the book. In The Children of Men, humanity has just lost the ability to procreate. No new kids are born. In humanity, people cannot have kids. And this then really leads to the collapse of society in all kinds of ways and the elevation of authoritarian governments. And it's a really interesting premise. And I liked The Children of Men for the most part, but there is a huge gaping plot hole in it, in my personal opinion. And I just don't think this is, P.D. James's best area. But memorable characters, some decent action, really interesting ideas about what society might do and how it might affect us not to be able to have kids. Anyway, there you go. There is my video about where not to start with the work of P.D. James, and then some ideas maybe about where to start if you're interested. If you're doing Cloak and Dagger Christmas, P.D. James I think is a good, reliable, solid read. It's not hardcore detective fiction. It's not cozy detective fiction. It's somewhere nicely and happily in the middle. Anyway, look forward to your comments in the comment section below, and as always, thank you for watching.